So in this video, we have a few of our kind of best of 2019 drone video. In this first one, we have three individuals. So we have the biggest whale that you see here is J47, and the two smaller whales are J53 and J56. And J56 was less than a year old, and J53 is a few years old. So these whales are not super closely related. They are all within J-pod, but they're not direct relatives. But we still kind of have, it almost seems like a little bit of babysitting going on here. J56's mother, J31 rather, is not in the frame currently. We didn't actually know where she was when we were filming this, but here she comes up from the deep, and you can actually see she has a fish in her mouth. And she's joined by J46, another J17 whale. So she comes up with this fish. J56 is clearly very, very interested, and she actually bites the fish in half right about there, leaves some of it behind that J46 goes for, along with J53. J47 continues following, kind of maybe hoping for some extra scraps. So that's potentially an example of reciprocation of the babysitting with some food sharing. In this video, we have J36 is the, or rather J37 is the female in the front, and the male behind her is J26. It's unclear exactly what's going on here, but it seemed to be some kind of courtship. J26 kind of followed J37 around for a few minutes. We actually were filming them for about half an hour, and this same kind of behavior kept going. So this could be some kind of courtship. J37 breaching there. It's interesting. It's an interesting contrast to some of the more kind of high energy socializing and sexual behavior we see in a lot of these other videos. Here we have a group consisting of a bunch of K and J-pod whales traveling south along the west side of San Juan Island. That's K34 there at the edge. There's a breach. This is kind of just a travel, but with some socializing. And it's really interesting just seeing how much movement kind of within the group there is. We kind of watch them from the side, and you kind of assume everything is quite steady in terms of where everybody is in the group and how they're interacting. But we actually see quite a bit of movement underwater, quite a bit of kind of mixing around, shifting positions, rolling, even in a situation here where we'd classify it as travel. Same thing here. This is actually heading up into Georgia Strait now, just with J-pod. All of J-pod was actually in this group, other than the J16s. And again, from the surface, this just looks like a bunch of fins coming up and a bunch of traveling whales. When you see underwater, you see they're actually taking looks at each other, moving around the group, quite a bit of touching and rolling, and movement within the group. There's a little bit of a copying going on there, potentially. And the water's a bit murkier here, so it's not as clear as some of our other videos, but it's quite nice. And so in this video, you have three J17 whales. So you have J46, J44, and J53. So J44 is the whale who just turned on his side there, followed by the other two. J53 is in the middle, and then J46 is at the top of the screen. The synchronization between these three is really, really interesting to me. The way that even in just small kinds of movements, like turning on your side while you're moving forward, they tend to kind of synchronize and behave in unison, which is really interesting. It's unclear exactly what the function is there, although it probably has something to do with signaling social relationships and social bonds. It's also just lovely to have days like this where the water rather is so clear that you can see them in such detail. So this last video is what we call a cuddle puddle, just a whole bunch of J-pod whales, kind of all together, a lot of tactile rubbing, some sexual behavior, but for killer whales, it kind of seems like sexual behavior and social behavior are pretty interchangeable. Something I find quite interesting about this video is how central the youngest calf, J56, is to all this socialization. So J56 is the whale who just kind of got tossed a little bit just there, which is actually something we see quite a lot. She seems to kind of enjoy it a bit. Doesn't seem to be an aggressive behavior, and in fact, that was her mother who just tossed her. And you'll actually see as they kind of form this puddle, she ends up right in between a whole bunch of whales, kind of sandwiched in there. We don't know a lot about how cooperative care for young works in these killer whales, but it does seem to be a really important part of a lot of other whales' kind of lifestyles and group living. And I think that's reflected here really, really kind of nicely and beautifully by how kind of physically central the youngest calves are in these big bouts of socialization in these whales. Really just kind of laying on top of both their mom, but also other females, other members of the pod who aren't even really very closely related, all seem to kind of be drawn to these little calves. It's a really, really interesting phenomenon. No fun to code all of the various contacts in this group, keeping track of who's touching who and who's interacting, but really, really nice to watch.